They kicked me out, but I flew back on my private jet. Please like this video and subscribe to the channel if you believe every woman deserves a second chance. And leave a comment with your favorite part of the story. "You are dead to us," my husband and his family declared, their voices like a knife when I couldn't give them a child. They threw me out with nothing but a small suitcase. I stayed silent for 4 years. Then I landed back in town on a private jet with a beautiful 2-year-old daughter and a handsome man by my side. Their jaws dropped, their pride shattered. My name is Clara. 4 years ago, my mother-in-law, Victoria, looked me dead in the eyes and said, "A woman without a child is like a tree without fruit." As she spoke, she handed me my suitcase, banishing me from the only home I had known as a married woman. But let me take you back to where it all began to fall apart. I was sitting in Dr. Evans' office, clutching Liam's hand so tight my knuckles were white. The test results lay on the mahogany desk between us like a death sentence. Liam's jaw was clenched, his eyes fixed on the wall behind the doctor's head. "I'm sorry," Dr. Evans said softly. "The tests show significant fertility challenges. Conception will be extremely difficult, though not impossible." The car ride home was silent, save for the hum of Liam's BMW. As we pulled into the circular driveway of his family's estate, I could see Victoria and his sister Julia through the kitchen window, their heads together in conversation. They looked up with anticipation when we walked through the door. "Well?" Victoria's voice was sharp, laced with expectation. "What did the doctor say?" Liam loosened his tie and poured himself a whiskey before answering. "It's going to be more complicated than we thought." Julia set her teacup down with a delicate clink. "What does that mean exactly?" I opened my mouth to explain, but Liam spoke first. "Clara has some issues that make pregnancy unlikely." Issues. As if I were a broken appliance that needed repair. Victoria's face went through a series of expressions: disappointment, frustration, and finally, something that looked like disgust. "I see. Well, there are always options, aren't there? Specialists, treatments," I said quietly, finally finding my voice. But Victoria had already turned away, busy rearranging the flowers on the counter. The conversation was over for her, but I could feel the judgment settling around me like a heavy blanket. That night, Liam and I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The silence stretched between us until I couldn't bear it anymore. "We'll figure it out," I whispered. "There are treatments, procedures." "Clara." His voice was tired, distant. "We'll see what happens." What happened was 18 months of monthly disappointments, 18 months of negative pregnancy tests that I hid in the bottom of bathroom trash cans, 18 months of Victoria's increasingly pointed remarks about our childless state. "My friend's daughter-in-law just had twins," she announced one morning at breakfast. "Such a blessing. Elvira feels so fulfilled as a grandmother." Julia nodded eagerly. "I can't wait to have kids. I think I'll get pregnant 6 months after getting married." I pushed the eggs on my plate. I had no appetite. These breakfast conversations had become a kind of torture, designed to remind me of my failure without anyone having to say it directly. Liam stopped coming to the doctor's appointments after the 8th month. "I have a conference call," he would say. "Oh, the office needs me." Always something more important than finding out why his wife couldn't give him the family he wanted. I started going alone, sitting in waiting rooms full of pregnant women, feeling like an imposter among the truly fertile. Dr. Evans was kind but realistic. Each treatment was more invasive, more costly, and more likely to fail than the last. "Maybe we should consider adoption," I suggested one night, as Liam was reviewing business documents at the kitchen table. He didn't look up. "My mother wants biological grandchildren. You know how she feels about bloodlines." Bloodlines. as if we were breeding racehorses instead of trying to build a family. The final straw came on a Tuesday in March. I had been feeling queasy for 3 days and allowed myself the dangerous luxury of hope. I bought a pregnancy test on the way home from work and locked myself in our bathroom, my hands shaking as I waited for the results. Negative. I sat down on the bathroom floor and finally let myself cry. Not the quiet, dignified tears I usually allowed myself, but ugly, heaving sobs that came from deep in my chest. When I finally composed myself and went downstairs, I found Liam in his study, papers spread across his desk. Divorce papers. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked, picking up the documents with numb fingers. Liam finally looked up, his expression almost relieved. "Clara, we both know this isn't working. We want different things." "We want the same thing," I said. "A family. I want a family that's actually possible." Attached to the divorce papers were the prenuptial agreements, highlighted in yellow. Every clause that protected the Sterling family wealth, every line that left me with nothing if our marriage failed. I remembered signing it 3 years earlier, young and in love, certain we would never need it. I was 25, I said, looking at my own signature. I thought love would be enough. Love doesn't pay the bills or continue family names. Victoria appeared in the doorway as if she'd been listening. "Clara, dear, I think it's best you pack your things tonight. Julia can drive you wherever you need to go." I looked at Liam, expecting him to stand up for me, to tell his mother she was overstepping. Instead, he gathered the papers and slid them into a folder. "My lawyer will be in touch with you for the details," he said, without meeting my eyes. 3 years of marriage, reduced to the clothes that would fit in a carry-on suitcase. "You're young," Victoria said, as I folded my wedding dress into tissue paper. "You'll find someone else, someone better suited for your limitations." Julia appeared with my coat and purse. "The taxi's here." I walked through the house for the last time, past the dining room where I'd hosted dinners, past the living room where I'd spent countless nights, feeling like a complete stranger. Liam was nowhere to be seen. At the front door, Victoria handed me my suitcase and $20 from her purse. "For the taxi," she said. "You'll understand one day. A woman who can't give her husband children is incomplete. Liam deserves better." I got into the taxi with no destination in mind and no idea how I would survive. As we drove away from the estate, I pressed my face against the window, watching the only life I had ever known disappear behind perfectly manicured hedges. The driver caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "Where to, miss?" I had no answer. I had no home, no money, no plan. But as we drove through the city, something hard and determined began to form in my chest. They had thrown me out like garbage. They had discarded me as useless. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. The taxi dropped me off at a motel on the outskirts of downtown. $43 for 3 nights, in a room that smelled of cigarettes and broken dreams. I sat on the scratchy bedspread and stared at my suitcase, wondering how my life had shrunk to fit inside one small bag. The next morning, I walked into Sterling's dry cleaning, my only business suit on, and asked for a job. The owner, Mrs. Chen, looked me up and down with tired eyes. "Ever worked in sales?" I lied. "Yes." She handed me an apron that had seen better days. $10 an hour, cash only. You start now." The first client handed me a cashmere coat that probably cost more than my monthly rent at Liam's house. My hands shook as I tagged it, remembering how I used to organize entire closets full of clothes like this. The client barely looked at me, treating me like part of the machinery. During my break, I locked myself in the tiny employee bathroom and cried into a paper towel. But when the bell rang for customers, I wiped my face and smiled like nothing had happened. That night, I found a studio apartment for $400 a month. The landlord, Mr. Lopez, was suspicious of my lack of references until I offered him 2 months' rent, front in cash. The apartment had a dripping faucet, a window that wouldn't lock, and a radiator that clanked all night. But it was mine. I bought a mattress from a second-hand store and hauled it up 3 flights of stairs myself. The previous tenant had left a dented teapot and a single fork. I ate instant noodles for dinner, sitting cross-legged on the floor, telling myself this was temporary. But temporary stretched into weeks, then months. The dry cleaning barely covered rent and food. Some nights, I went to bed hungry rather than spend my last few dollars. I told myself stories in the dark, imagining what I would say to Victoria if I ever saw her again. "You're not done yet," I whispered to the cracked ceiling. "They don't get the last word." Mrs. Chen noticed I never took sick days and always stayed late to help with the books. "You're too smart for this place," she said one night as we were closing up. "Why are you here?" I couldn't tell her about Liam, about the prenup, about being thrown out like trash. So I just said, "Starting over." She seemed to understand and slipped me an extra $20. For groceries. 3 months later, I saw a help wanted sign in the Giralda bookstore. The owner, an old woman named Elena, hired me for the morning shifts after I showed I could alphabetize faster than her current employee. Another $10 an hour, plus I could read during the quiet periods. But 10 plus 10 still wasn't enough. I found work at night cleaning office buildings downtown. The cleaning company didn't ask questions. They just handed me keys and pointed me toward the supply closets. I would work until midnight, scrubbing toilets and emptying wastebaskets, and then get a few hours of sleep before my bookstore shift. On weekends, I did catering gigs through a temp agency, serving champagne to people who looked exactly like Liam's friends, people who didn't see me, even when I was standing right in front of them. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was invisible to the same social class that had once claimed me as their own. One Saturday, I was serving at a corporate event when I overheard 2 women discussing their nannies' salaries. They complained about paying $800 a week for childcare. I bit my tongue and refilled their wine glasses, calculating that they spent more on nannies than I earned in a month. The juggling nearly broke me. I would fall asleep standing in the bookstore, waking up with imprints of book spines on my cheek. Elena started leaving me protein bars and coffee without saying a word. These small kindnesses kept me going when everything else felt impossible. My luck changed on a Tuesday morning when I spilled coffee all over myself, rushing between jobs. I ducked into a small deli on the corner to clean up and ran into a man reviewing spreadsheets at a back table. "Clara? Clara Garcia?" I looked up, surprised anyone remembered my maiden name. The man was in his 50s, with kind eyes and laugh lines. It took me a moment to recognize him. "Dr. Santos!" I gasped. He stood up, smiling broadly. "I thought that was you. What are the odds?" Dr. Hector Santos had lived 3 houses down from my childhood home. His mother, Mrs. Santos, used to give me homemade empanadas when I walked past her garden. I remembered the day she had fallen on her front steps. I was 16, and I helped her inside. I stayed with her until Dr. Santos came home from college. "You helped my mother that day she fell," he said, as if reading my thoughts. She never forgot that kindness. We talked for 20 minutes. He now owned a small logistics company. He had built it from nothing after immigrating 15 years ago. When I mentioned I was between opportunities, his expression grew thoughtful. "I'm actually looking for an operations manager, someone who can handle details, work with difficult people, think on their feet. The pay is decent and there's room to grow." I almost laughed. "Dr. Santos, I work in a dry cleaner and a bookstore. I clean offices at night. I don't know anything about logistics. You know about people. You know about working hard. And you know about starting over." He pulled out a business card. "Come in Monday morning. Let's see what you can do. That weekend, I researched everything I could about logistics and supply chain management. I borrowed business books from Elena and read until my eyes burned. On Monday morning, I walked into Santos Logistics in my one professional outfit, the same one I had worn to the dry cleaner 6 months earlier. The office was small but organized, with 3 employees fielding client accounts. Dr. Santos introduced me to the team and gave me a desk near the window. For the first time in months, I had a place that felt like it could become something. "Start with these client files," he said, handing me a pile of folders. "Learn the accounts. Figure out where we can improve efficiency. Don't be afraid to ask questions." I threw myself into the work with a desperate determination. Every report I wrote, every client call I handled, every process I streamlined, felt like proof that I was more than what Victoria had called me. More than a barren woman. More than a failure. The other employees, Maria and David, were skeptical at first of the boss's new hire. But when I reorganized the filing system and created a tracking spreadsheet that saved them hours each week, they started coming to me with questions and ideas. For the first time since leaving Liam's house, I felt useful, valuable, like I could have a future that didn't involve counting pennies for groceries. 3 months into my job, Dr. Santos called me into his office. "You've increased our efficiency by 1/3, he said, sliding an envelope across his desk. "This is your new salary." The number inside made my hands tremble. It was more than I had made at my 3 previous jobs combined. Enough to move into a better apartment, buy real furniture, eat real meals instead of instant noodles. That night, I sat on my floor mattress for the last time and allowed myself to believe something I hadn't dared to hope for in months. Maybe I wasn't really done yet. 6 months into my job at Santos Logistics, I was eating at my desk when Maria mentioned her side hustle in crypto. "I made $300 last month just on my phone," she said casually, scrolling through charts. Something clicked. I had been so focused on surviving paycheck to paycheck that I had never considered making my money work for me. That night, I signed up for an online finance course and spent my first Saturday in months doing something other than laundry and grocery shopping. The instructor, a woman named Dr. Angela Chen, talked about compound interest like it was magic. "Your money should have babies," she said during a video lecture, "and those babies should have babies." I started small, investing $50 from each paycheck into index funds. Then I found a course on business strategy taught by a venture capitalist who had built 3 companies from the ground up. I watched his classes during lunch breaks, taking notes in the margins of recycled paper. "The difference between the wealthy and everyone else," he explained, "is not how much they make. It's how much they keep and grow." I started seeing everything differently. When Dr. Santos mentioned we had lost a major client over poor communication, I didn't just fix the immediate problem. I designed a whole new client retention system. When our delivery tracking broke down, I researched software solutions and presented 3 options with cost-benefit analyses. "Where did you learn all this?" Dr. Santos asked after I streamlined our entire invoicing process. "YouTube University," I said, only half joking. My first real breakthrough came when I noticed patterns in our shipping data. Certain routes were consistently over budget, while others were under. I spent 2 weeks building a predictive model and presented it to Dr. Santos one Tuesday morning. "This could save us $40,000 a year," he said, staring at my spreadsheets. "Clara, this is brilliant." That afternoon, he handed me an envelope with a $5,000 bonus. I stared at the check for a full minute before folding it carefully into my wallet. Instead of spending it on furniture or a vacation, I researched emerging tech companies. There was one startup called Green Solutions that was developing efficiency software for solar panels. The risk made my stomach churn. Losing $5,000 would set me back months. But something about their business model just felt right. I bought shares one Wednesday morning, my hands shaking as I clicked confirm purchase. 3 months later, Green Solutions announced a partnership with a major energy company. My investment doubled overnight. I reinvested it all, this time spreading it across 5 different startups. 1 failed completely, 2 stayed flat, but the other 2 skyrocketed. On my first anniversary at Santos Logistics, my portfolio was worth $23,000. "You look different," Maria observed one morning. "More confident or something." She was right. I had stopped checking my bank account with dread and started checking my investment app with anticipation. The numbers that used to terrify me now excited me. I was learning their language, understanding their patterns. Dr. Santos promoted me to Senior Operations Manager with a salary increase that finally allowed me to move into a 1-bedroom apartment with real furniture. But instead of drastically upgrading my lifestyle, I kept my spending modest and funneled the extra income into investments. The real shift came when I discovered angel investment networks. These were groups of accredited investors who pooled money to fund early-stage companies. The minimum investment was $50,000, more than I had ever imagined having. But I had been studying the market for over a year. I had learned to read financial statements, analyze business models, and spot promising trends. When a biotech company developing breakthroughs in fertility treatments landed on my desk, I knew this was my moment. I liquidated half my portfolio and joined the investment round. The irony was not lost on me. Here I was, funding the very type of medical breakthrough that could have saved my marriage. But this wasn't about the past anymore. It was about building something bigger than my pain. The biotech investment took 18 months to mature, but when it did, my $50,000 stake turned into $200,000. I was learning that wealth wasn't just about working harder. It was about positioning yourself in the path of other people's success. My portfolio crossed $500,000 on a rainy Thursday. I was reviewing quarterly reports when the notification popped up on my phone. For a moment, I just sat there, remembering the woman who had eaten instant noodles on a floor mattress 2 years earlier. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done since my divorce. I went shopping for pleasure instead of necessity. There was a downtown boutique I had walked past countless times, admiring the leather handbags in the window, but never daring to go inside. The saleswoman looked at me skeptically when I walked in, wearing jeans and sneakers. But when I pointed to a caramel-colored leather tote and said, "I'll take that one," her attitude changed instantly. "Excellent choice," she said, wrapping it carefully in tissue paper. "Will that be cash or card?" "Card," I said, handing over my credit card, without looking at the price tag. Walking out of that boutique with my first luxury purchase felt like reclaiming a part of me I thought was gone forever. It wasn't about the purse. It was about being someone who could buy beautiful things without counting pennies or asking permission. My millionaire moment happened on a Tuesday morning as I reviewed my portfolio over coffee. The tech sector had skyrocketed overnight, and my investments had crossed into 7 figures while I slept. $1,043,712. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding so hard I was sure the whole coffee shop could hear it. I didn't yell or dance or call anyone. I just whispered, "You should have never let me go," and I closed my laptop. That afternoon, I made my boldest move yet. I had been researching private aviation companies and discovered I could buy into a jet management firm. The investment was substantial, $400,000, but it came with usage rights. As I signed the paperwork, I thought of Victoria's face as she handed me that suitcase, of Liam's relief as he handed me the divorce papers, of Julia's smug smile as she called the taxi. They had thrown me out thinking I was worthless. Now, I was literally buying pieces of the sky. The flight coordinator called 2 weeks later to schedule my first trip. "Where would you like to go, Ms. Garcia?" I looked out the window of my apartment at the city where I had rebuilt my life from nothing. "Wherever I want," I said. And for the first time in years, that was exactly true. But having all the freedom in the world meant nothing when you had no one to share it with. 3 years into my financial success, I realized I had become excellent at building wealth, but terrible at building connections. My nights were spent alone, reviewing investment portfolios and planning my next business move. It was during this period of loneliness that I decided to step back from the corporate consulting work I had been doing and try something completely different. I wanted to remember what it felt like to serve people directly, to have simple human interactions that weren't about profit margins or market trends. The cafe, Cafe Luna, was a small neighborhood spot with mismatched chairs and local art covering the walls. The owner, Señora Romero, hired me for the weekend shifts after I admitted I had no restaurant experience, but needed to reconnect with real people. "You seem like someone who has forgotten how to just be," she said, tying an apron around my waist. "This place will teach you." My first Saturday shift was a mess. I mixed up orders, spilled coffee on myself twice, and couldn't figure out how the espresso machine worked. But there was something liberating about failing at something so completely outside my business success. That's when I noticed him. Lucas sat at the corner table every Saturday morning, reading different books and drinking the same order, a black coffee and a blueberry muffin. He was in his 30s, with kind eyes, and hands that moved gently as he turned pages. What struck me most was how he actually looked at people. Not through them or past them, but at them. He noticed details others missed, like how I always wore the same comfortable black shoes because my feet hurt from years of standing, or how my smile would tighten as the morning rush intensified. When I got his order wrong, which happened more often than I'd like to admit, he would just smile and say, "Don't worry, I'm not in a hurry." The third Saturday, he asked for my name. "Clara," I said, refilling his coffee. "I'm Lucas, and thank you for the coffee, for working so hard to make everyone's morning better, even when you're clearly exhausted." I felt the heat rise to my cheeks. It had been so long since anyone had noticed my effort instead of just my results. Over the next few weeks, our conversations grew longer. He was a social worker at a children's center, helping kids navigate family crisis situations. He had a way of listening that made you feel heard, not judged. "You look sad sometimes," he said one morning when the cafe was quiet, "like you're carrying something heavy." I almost brushed off his observation, but something in his genuine concern made me stop. Some baggage from my past, nothing too dramatic. Baggage is usually dramatic to the person carrying it. After my shifts, Lucas started waiting for me. We would walk to the park across the street and sit on the bench, talking about everything except my money or his work. He told me he had grown up in foster care, learning to find family in unexpected places. I told him about my childhood dreams of being a teacher, of how I had wanted to help kids learn to read. "What changed?" he asked. "Life," I said simply. One evening, as autumn was turning the leaves gold, I found myself telling him everything. About Liam and the fertility issues. About Victoria's cruelty and the prenup that left me with nothing. About sleeping on a floor mattress and eating instant noodles for months. Lucas listened without interrupting, without trying to offer solutions or empty comfort. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment. "I'm sorry that happened to you," he finally said. "But I need you to know something. You're not broken. You're not incomplete. In fact, you're one of the strongest people I've ever met." I felt tears threaten and looked away. You don't understand. I couldn't give him what he wanted. I failed at the most basic thing women are supposed to do. Clara. His voice was firm but gentle. Look at me. I turned to face him, expecting pity. Instead, I saw admiration. You survived being thrown away by people who were supposed to love you. You built a life from nothing. You chose kindness over bitterness. That is not a failure. That is extraordinary. Something inside me shifted that night. For the first time since my divorce, I felt seen for who I actually was, not for who I couldn't be. Our relationship grew slowly, carefully. Lucas never pressured me for more than I was ready to give. He never asked about my finances or seemed impressed when I mentioned my business success. He was interested in Clara the person, not Clara the portfolio. We started cooking dinner together in his small apartment. He taught me how to make fresh pasta, and I showed him my grandmother's apple pie recipe. These simple, domestic moments felt more intimate than anything I had shared with Liam. 8 months after our first conversation, Lucas proposed to me during one of our evening walks, not with a flashy ring or a grand gesture, but with honesty. I love who you are when you're with me, he said, stopping by the fountain where we had shared so many conversations. I love who I am when I'm with you. We're both better together. The ring was simple, elegant, and clearly chosen with thought rather than to impress anyone else. Yes, I said, before he could even properly ask the question. We got married 6 months later, in a simple ceremony at the courthouse. I wore a cream-colored dress from a local boutique, and Lucas wore his best suit. Senora Romero was our witness, crying happy tears as she signed the papers. No prenups? The officiant asked, reviewing our documents. Lucas and I looked at each other and laughed. No prenups, I said. We're in this together. After the ceremony, we had dinner at Cafe Luna. Senora Romero had closed early and cooked for us herself. It was perfect in its simplicity. The miracle came 14 months later. I was reviewing quarterly reports when the nausea hit me so suddenly I had to run to the bathroom. The pregnancy test I bought that afternoon showed 2 pink lines. I stared at it in disbelief, remembering all those negative tests from years ago. This time it felt different. This time, it felt like hope instead of desperation. When Lucas got home from work, I was sitting on our sofa, still holding the test. Clara, what's wrong? I handed him the test without saying anything. His face went through confusion, recognition, and then pure joy. Are you sure? He whispered. As sure as you can't be with these things. Lucas sat down beside me and held me. We both cried tears of amazement, of gratitude, of disbelief that something so wanted could actually happen. 9 months later, I held my son in my arms. Leo Christian Garcia, named after his father and carrying my maiden name by choice, was perfect, healthy, and completely ours. As Lucas cried beside my hospital bed, I thought of Victoria's words from years ago about being a tree without fruit, incomplete and useless. Now, I was a mother, but more importantly, I was a woman who had learned her worth wasn't determined by anyone else's expectations. Somewhere across town, I imagined Victoria choking on her morning tea if she ever found out. But honestly, I was too happy to care. Leo was 18 months old and taking his first wobbly steps across our living room when the unexpected message arrived. I was checking emails while he played with wooden blocks when I saw the name Julia Sterling in my inbox. I gasped. I hadn't heard from Liam's family in over 4 years. The subject line read, Invitation, Women's Leadership Gala, Exclusive Guest List. I opened it with trembling fingers. Dear C. Garcia, your firm, Garcia Strategic Consulting, has been recommended as a rising force in business leadership. We would be honored to have you attend our annual charity gala in support of female entrepreneurship. This exclusive event brings together the city's most influential female leaders. Please RSVP at your earliest convenience. Julia Sterling, event chair. She had no idea who she was inviting. My consulting firm had grown beyond anything I had imagined. After Leo was born, I pivoted from investing to helping other women build their businesses. My client list included tech entrepreneurs, medical professionals, and tail innovators. Julia must have seen my firm's recent feature in Business Weekly magazine on women-led firms making a 7-figure impact. I stared at the email for a full minute, my heart racing. The gala was being held at the Sterling estate, the very house I had been kicked out of with a single suitcase, the same driveway where Victoria had given me $20 for a taxi. Lucas walked into the room, fresh from putting Leo down for his nap. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I showed him the email. His expression shifted from confusion to understanding. "You don't have to go," he said softly, sitting beside me on the couch. "I know." I read the invitation again. "But maybe I want to go." That night, after Leo was asleep, Lucas and I talked about what this meant. He never tried to talk me out of it or suggest I was looking for trouble. He just listened as I processed my feelings. "I'm not angry anymore," I said, curled up against his shoulder. "That's what surprises me. I should be furious, but I'm just curious. What would it be like to walk back into that world as someone completely different?" "You are someone completely different," Lucas said. "The question is whether they deserve to meet her." I spent 3 days deciding. Then, I sent my RSVP. "Delighted to attend. I will be bringing my family." The week before the gala, I made careful preparations. I arranged my share of the private jet. I selected a midnight blue silk dress that made me feel powerful and elegant, and had my assistant coordinate all the logistics. Most importantly, I made sure Lucas felt comfortable with the plan. "Are you sure you want to bring Leo?" I asked as we reviewed the evening's schedule. Lucas smiled, bouncing our son on his knee. "This little guy is living proof that you are exactly who you're supposed to be. If we're going to do this, we're doing it as a family." The night of the gala, our driver picked us up in a sleek black car that would take us to the private airfield. Leo was babbling happily in his car seat, dressed in a tiny navy blue suit that matched his father's. My hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon, and my jewelry was simple, but expensive. Diamond studs that caught the light beautifully. As our jet descended toward the city airport, I looked at the lights below and felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. This wasn't about revenge or proving a point. It was about showing up as the woman I had become. The airport limousine pulled into the Sterling family's circular driveway at exactly 7 o'clock. There were photographers lining the entrance, capturing arriving guests for the society pages. I could see the house through the car windows, every light on, just as it had been during my marriage. "Ready?" Lucas asked, adjusting Leo's tiny bow tie. "Ready." Our driver opened the door, and I stepped out first. The camera flashes started popping immediately as photographers realized they didn't recognize me, but could tell by my arrival that I was someone important. Lucas appeared at my side, handsome and confident, and then lifted Leo from his car seat. We walked up the same stone steps where I had once carried grocery bags as Liam's wife. Now, I was returning as myself, successful, loved, and whole. The moment we walked into the foyer, I saw Liam across the room. He was talking to a group of men, gesturing with a cocktail glass, looking exactly the same as always, except for a few streaks of gray at his temples. He glanced casually toward the entrance and then froze, his expression almost comical. His face went completely pale. The glass slipped in his hand, though he caught it before it fell. I watched his eyes move from my face to Lucas, then to Leo, and back to me. Confusion and shock were clearly written on his features. He excused himself from his conversation and started walking toward us, his steps uncertain. "Clara." His voice was barely audible over the party chatter. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Liam." My voice was calm, even friendly. I was invited. Julia's building quite an impressive guest list. His eyes kept darting to Leo, who was happily playing with Lucas's tie. Who is... "This is my husband, Lucas, and our son, Leo." I made the introduction smoothly, as if we were meeting at any normal social event. Lucas extended his hand politely. "Nice to meet you, Liam." Liam shook it mechanically, still staring at Leo with something between awe and devastation. Before he could say anything else, Victoria appeared at his side. She had aged in the last 4 years. Her face held the lines of someone under too much stress. When she saw me, she stopped so abruptly that Julia, following behind her, nearly ran into her back. "Clara!" Victoria's voice came out as a whisper. Julia's face went through confusion, recognition, and then something approaching horror as she realized what she had done. "Hello, Victoria," I said pleasantly. "What a lovely event. The decorations are beautiful." Victoria opened her mouth, but no words came out. She stared at Leo, who at that moment chose to laugh and reach his small hands toward the glittering chandelier overhead. Julia recovered first, her face flushed. I didn't realize. My firm name, Garcia, is my maiden name," I explained softly. "I went back to it after my divorce, less complicated for business." The silence stretched between us until Leo began babbling, pointing at the flowers arranged throughout the foyer. The sound of his innocent joy seemed to break something in Victoria's composure. "How old is he?" she asked quietly. 18 months, Lucas answered, his voice warm with pride. I watched Victoria do the math. I watched her realize that I had had the child she had said I never could, with a man who clearly adored us both. "Tell me, Victoria," I said softly, adjusting Leo's collar. "How's that tree without fruit doing now?" The reference to her cruel words from years ago hung in the air. Victoria's face crumpled slightly, but she didn't respond. Julia spilled champagne all down the front of her dress, the golden liquid spreading across the expensive fabric. She just stared at the stain, as if she couldn't comprehend how it had happened. All around us, the party continued. Other guests mingled and laughed, completely oblivious to the small earthquake happening in their hosts' lives. I didn't need to say anything else. My presence, my happiness, my beautiful family. We were living proof that their judgment had been wrong, that their cruelty had failed to destroy me. I had become exactly who I was meant to be, and it had nothing to do with them. We stayed at the gala for exactly 2 hours. Long enough to make our point, short enough to avoid unnecessary drama. As we walked back to our limousine, with Leo sleeping peacefully in Lucas's arms, I felt something I hadn't expected. Complete closure. The ride to the airport was quiet. Lucas held my hand as I processed what had just happened. As we boarded our jet, I looked at the city lights one last time and realized something profound. I didn't need to see them ever again. That night, as we flew home, I made a decision that would shape the rest of my life. I was done looking backward. The next morning, I deleted Liam's number from my phone, not out of anger, but out of finality. I unfollowed Julia and Victoria on all social media, not because it hurt, but because their lives no longer interested me. For 4 years, I had occasionally checked their updates, telling myself it was curiosity. In reality, it was a habit I had held on to from when their opinions mattered. They didn't anymore. Lucas found me in the kitchen making breakfast, humming as I scrambled eggs. Leo was in his high chair, happily tossing Cheerios onto the floor. "You look different this morning," Lucas observed, pouring coffee. "Lighter, somehow. I feel like I just put down a suitcase I've been carrying for years, I said, kissing his cheek. I didn't even realize how heavy it was until I let it go. 3 months later, that sense of freedom led to the most meaningful project of my life. I was reading a news article about rising divorce rates and the financial devastation many women faced afterward, when an idea struck me. What if we started a foundation? I suggested to Lucas that night, as we walked through our neighborhood. Something to help women rebuild themselves after divorce. Lucas stopped and turned to face me. Tell me more. So many women sign prenups like I did, or sacrifice their careers for their marriages. When it all falls apart, they're left with nothing. What if we could give them the tools and resources to start over? Within 6 months, we established the Phoenix Foundation, named after the mythical bird that rises from the ashes. Our mission was simple: to provide financial education, business mentorship, and emotional support to women rebuilding their lives after divorce. Our first client was Maria, a 38-year-old teacher whose husband had left her for his secretary. She came to our office with 2 small children and a checking account balance of $40. I don't know where to start, she said, tears in her eyes. I haven't worked in 8 years. I don't even know how to write a resume. I sat across from her, remembering my own $20 and my single suitcase. You start right where you are, I told her, and we'll help you figure out the next step. 6 months later, Maria had completed our financial literacy program. She had secured a teaching position and was saving money for the first time in her adult life. Watching her confidence grow reminded me why this work was so important. Leo learned to walk in the foundation's offices. He would toddle back and forth between conference rooms, while I taught budgeting workshops or Lucas facilitated support groups. Our staff became his extended family, and he became our little mascot of hope, proof that beautiful things could grow from difficult beginnings. By Leo's 2nd birthday, we had helped over 200 women restart their lives. Every success story felt personal, like healing a wound I had carried for years. Mommy's story, Leo demanded one night, climbing onto my lap with his favorite book. Instead of reading from the page, I found myself telling him stories I had never planned to share. Stories about being strong when people are cruel. About how sometimes the family you choose matters more than the family you're born into. About how setbacks can become setups for something better. You came to Mommy and Daddy when we needed you most, I whispered, stroking his dark hair. You taught us that love creates its own miracles. Lucas appeared in the doorway, smiling at us. Room for one more on that chair? As my boys cuddled around me, I thought of the woman I had been 4 years ago. She was so focused on what she lacked, she couldn't see what she already had. So desperate for approval, she had forgotten to approve of herself. The foundation grew, but so did our family in unexpected ways. We hired women from our program who had rebuilt their careers. We created a mentorship network where program graduates helped newcomers. We built partnerships with divorce lawyers who referred clients who needed our services. One afternoon, while reviewing applications for our scholarship program, I came across a name that made me pause. Jennifer Sterling, Liam's cousin, recently divorced and struggling to support her 2 twin daughters. She had applied using her maiden name, probably having no idea who was reviewing her paperwork. I called Lucas into my office and showed him the application. What do you want to do? He asked. I thought about it for exactly 30 seconds. Help her. Her kids need their mother to be stable and confident. That's more important than old family drama. Jennifer became one of our most successful program participants. She never knew of my connection to her family, and I never told her. She didn't need that burden as she rebuilt her life. 2 years later, on Leo's 4th birthday, I watched him playing in our backyard with neighborhood kids and children of mothers who had graduated from our foundation program. Lucas was on the grill, laughing with other dads about the challenges of potty training and bedtime negotiations. This was success, not the bank account numbers or the business accolades, although those were nice. This, the laughter, the community, the sense of belonging we had created. This was everything I had thought I wanted in my first marriage, but had never found. That night, after the guests had left and Leo was asleep, I sat in our garden with a cup of tea. Lucas joined me, carrying a leftover slice of birthday cake. "Any regrets?" he asked, sitting beside me on our porch swing. I considered the question seriously. Did I regret the pain of my first marriage? The humiliation of being thrown out? The months of eating instant noodles and sleeping on a floor mattress? None, I finally said. Everything that happened brought me here. To you, to Leo, to the foundation, to this life. If they hadn't broken me completely, I never would have found out how strong I really am. Lucas took my hand. "You know what I love most about you." "What?" "You turned your pain into purpose. You could have become bitter, but you chose to become better." As we sat there in comfortable silence, I thought of Victoria's words from years ago. She had called me a tree without fruit, incomplete and useless. She was wrong on every count. I wasn't incomplete. I was whole. I wasn't useless. I was invaluable to the people who mattered, and I wasn't barren. I had given birth not just to Leo, but to a new version of myself. Life hadn't gone according to my original plan. It had gone infinitely better. They called me broken. They called me barren. They called me a failure. But I call myself reborn. And that makes all the difference. If this story of transformation and quiet victory kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Clara stepped off that private jet with her son and husband, returning to the very same driveway she was once thrown out of. What was your favorite moment? Let me know in the comments below. Don't miss out on more inspiring stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a post.